Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another edition of Jerry's Take on China. There's a lot of controversy over what China is doing in the South China Sea. But there seems to be very little in the way of perspective. The recent water attack was not a hostile act by a military nation. I made a video about it already. It was a Chinese Coast Guard ship deterring another nation from building on a disputed island. And that's something the US seems keen to prevent China from doing, but quite okay with others doing. That's not fair. The truth, if anybody cares to look into it, is that in 1999 the Philippines illegally beached a landing craft on an uninhabited shoal in a disputed region. They're now attempting to deliver building supplies to fortify it. These are not humanitarian supplies. This is not food to the people who live there. This is building supplies to make this permanent. Many will argue, because Western media wants them to, that China is being aggressive. China, according to Chinese media, wants only one thing: that the shoal be left alone. Notwithstanding legal claims that several parties have over the region, China is not doing the wrong thing here. Putting the specific incident aside and looking at the much broader picture, many people are critical of China's expansion into the South China Seas. But their criticism, in my opinion, has three problems. One is the expansion fails to consider China's true situation. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Another is that when it's looked at in the broader sense, China's expansion there would be tiny. According to former Premier Li Keqiang, the other problem is that it's not even military. It's merely assumed by Western experts to be so. And it's frequently reported, if you read the reports carefully, that China could use these bases for military purposes. China denies that it does, and, as far as can be ascertained, only one military plane has ever landed in the region, and that was a humanitarian mission in 2016 to lift 3 sick people off the island. On the other hand, the USA has militarized the Pacific. It's clear the USA sees China as a threat, and discussions about and reasons for that are wide, varied, but not going to be articulated here. However, what is prominent is that when the USA considers a country a threat, that country better take care. Overall, the USA has 375,000 troops in the Pacific region to counter China. That's more than twice the 156,000 soldiers combined who stormed Normandy's beaches on D-Day. The USA military occupies 30% of Guam, with 7,000 troops there. It has 23 bases in Japan and Okinawa, and a further 15 bases in South Korea. They're currently building 4 more bases to supplement what they already have in the Philippines, and there's another one in Micronesia, in Palau, and along with Australia, they are refurbishing an older base in Papua New Guinea. More worryingly, they have US troops operating inside China, which after 12 months of US government denials was admitted by the Taiwanese administration to be true. Now, this is after successive presidents, Nixon, Carter, and Reagan, all promised not to do so. What's more, Reagan issued a 1982 communique stating that the US would not increase arms sales to Taiwan, and specifically stated that the USA would reduce weapon sales to zero in order to achieve a peaceful settlement. It seems current American presidents cannot be trusted to keep the words of their predecessors. But it's not just presidents. Congress too. For 38 years, over 7 different congressional sittings, the USA made congressional resolutions that it would not interfere in China's sovereign affairs, specifically in relation to Taiwan. Check the link I've provided. It's absolutely true. Moving away from the Pacific, The US is active in Africa. They have 29 military bases operating in 15 African countries, believe it or not, to defend US sovereignty in Africa. They invaded and occupied Iraq for 20 years because they thought their national security was threatened. The US invasion of Afghanistan was completely out of spite. Recovering from a 20-year war and economically speaking barely out of the Middle Ages, Afghanistan wouldn't give up bin Laden without evidence that he was guilty of a crime, resulting in US punishment of an invasion and another 20 years of war and occupation. Even earlier, they went to war in Vietnam and in Korea. Then they dropped more bombs in Laos and Cambodia than the entire ordnance dropped in the Second World War by all forces. And they called the bombers US aerial surveillance, presumably because the US had signed a neutrality agreement in the UN in 1962. The bombing of an officially recognized neutral country is surely something the International Criminal Court should investigate, but if they did, the US would sanction the court and potentially invade The Hague if they did try. So for now, it's just another example of US presidents not honoring the commitments of their predecessors. With the benefit of hindsight, we know all of the wars I've just mentioned were either avoidable to stop the spread of communism, which didn't work, or the reason for them was a lie. Not one was justified. None were a physical or military threat to the USA. And once we understand that fact, that the US Department of Defense will invade any country it deems a threat, whether real or not, and is currently surrounding China with a defensive island chain, we might start to look at China's military in a very different light. The South China Sea could be used as a modern-day version of the Great Wall, a defensive fortification. But it's tiny in comparison to the US buildup around China. How tiny? This will surprise you. There are just 2 airstrips. That's it. Deceptive reporting suggests that China has fully militarized 3 islands, but we're confused by the naming. Claims that China is militarizing Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, Meiji Reef, Pangangabin Reef, and the Spratly Islands. They abound in Western media, but believe it or not, those are all the same place. What media doesn't tell us is that China has only built 2 airstrips. One is on reclaimed land between 2 islands, and the other is not that far away. That's it. Only 2 airstrips. The Fiery Cross airstrip is 345 meters shorter than the Darwin military airstrip, which, like Darwin Port in Australia, is being extended to accommodate a bigger US military presence. Guam has 2 runways. Both are longer than the Fiery Cross runway, and the other airstrip on Meiji Reef is even shorter than that. And with the exception of that one medical evacuation in 2016 that I mentioned, no military plane has landed on either of them. The USA, or any other country, shouldn't feel threatened by China. There are a lot more things in the Pacific to worry about than the potential military use of China's 2 airstrips. For example, there's the real military presence in the Pacific and off the coast of China of an unknown number of nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed submarines. There are 2 aircraft carrier strike fleets and their attendant armadas in the vicinity. Plus, there are those 375,000 troops nearby, and they're all a long way from home, and they're all itching to defend the USA against what they perceive is a threat. If that's not a cause for concern, then nothing is. Thanks once again for watching Jerry's Take on China, and please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you wish, leave me a comment. I do try and get back to all of them, but I can tell you it's getting to be a big job now, and I might not get back to all of you, but I will keep trying to do that. Thanks very much. See you next time. Bye for now.